Well, welcome back to MGUY2. For those of you that are new to the channel, this is my second channel where I talk about things that are of interest to me that are not related to cars. If you want to check out my main channel, click on the link up there, which is to my main channel MGUY, which is all about my cars. So in this channel, we are basically doing anything that is kind of vaguely interesting to me, which I think might be interesting to you, but which is not car related. In this video, we're going to take a look at this particular camera here, which is a Bronica ETRS. And I'm quite a fan of old film cameras. I've done a video already on this channel, which is like a description of my Nikon F3, which is a 35mm camera from the 1980s. And in the past, I have had medium format cameras, and just to explain, medium format means film which is essentially larger than 35mm, but not as large as the sheet film that you can get, which is again another step up. But this is film that you can buy in a roll, like the old-fashioned cameras used to use back in the day. So this is a roll of 120 film, and it's about 6 centimeters across, and the number of frames you can get on the film depends on the aspect ratio of the camera that is using the film. It can be anything from 6 by 4.5, which is 6 centimeters by 4.5 centimeters, which is what this camera is. It can then go 6 by 6, which is a square format, 6 by 7, which is slightly longer, 6 by 9, 6 by 12, and there's even a 6 by 17 camera that gives these enormous panorama type shots on 120 film, which is crazy to look at when you see them. So back in the day when I was younger, I used to have quite a large collection of medium format cameras. They were actually Hasselblads. Hasselblad obviously is a very famous brand from Sweden. They were developed initially back in the 1950s, and famous primarily because it was the cameras that NASA used when they went to the moon. All purely mechanical, no electronic parts at all. So they would work without batteries. They had very high reliability, and that's basically why people used them. Over the years, I had to sell them for various reasons, moved on to other kinds of cameras. But I did want to get back into a rather cheaper version of a medium format camera. So I was on holiday in Adelaide recently, and there's a great camera shop there called Photo Co, which is in the Central Market. And they have a great selection of second-hand equipment, 35mm and medium format. I'll link down in the description to their website. And this particular camera caught my eye. I've never used a Bronica before, but my initial impressions with it have been really very positive. It's like a Hasselblad, it's a modular camera. So if you look at it from the side, you can see that you've got the lens here, you've got a camera body here, you've got a film back here, and a viewfinder here, and all of these individual parts are interchangeable. So a little button here removes the finder, and you can see the focusing screen down here, and you can put a prism on there if you want to use kind of eye level viewing. A button on the side here removes the film back. So the advantage of having these multiple film backs is that you can shoot different film stock and switch between them without having to finish a roll. So you could have color in one and black and white in another, or different film speeds, and you can then simply switch from one frame to the next into different film. And obviously it's interchangeable lenses as well, so the lens will detach and you can replace that. So I thought it would be interesting just to give you a little bit of a guided tour around this camera initially, and then we'll go out and take some pictures. So this camera is the ETRS. There are a number of different models of the ETR series. I think it started with the ETR, then the ETRS, and then the ETRSI. Now, I think the S is perhaps the best one to go for if you don't need the additional features of the I, which is, I think it's a mirror lockup and bulb time on the shutter, because I think the build quality of the ETRS is a little bit better. So let's just take a look around the camera and I can explain all the features and what it does. So having a look at the lens first, you've obviously got your aperture control on here, which is manual, and a focusing control here. On the left of the lens here, you've got a stop down button, so I don't know if you can see, but if I just press that, you can see the aperture blades just closing there. So that's to preview what your depth of field is going to look like. There's also a little switch on the back here. I've not used it, but I think that allows you to change the shutter to a T. I'm going to check that, and I'll put something on the screen if I'm wrong, but you need to actually undo that screw to move this little slider across. You can see Seiko here. So this, unlike the Hasselblad, has an electronic shutter built into the lens. So the shutter is in the lens. So if you take off the lens, there's not much that you can see, but you do see these electrical contacts here, and that sends the electrical signals from the camera body to the lens, and it's the camera body that does the timing of the shutter, but the electronic shutter itself is obviously in the lens. On the front here, we've got the lens release switch just down there. You've got your shutter release here. It's got a double lock here so that you can actually lock the shutter so it doesn't operate, and there's a middle position which I think, oh gosh, I can't remember what the middle position does. I'll put that in the on the screen now, what the middle position is. I haven't used it. And you've got a flash sync socket just in there, standard PC socket for flash. As I said, you've got a button on the side here, which if you push and pull back, that just releases the viewfinder, and similarly you can undo this little clip here. Where is it? There, and that allows you to lift out the focusing screen, which I'm not going to do because it's a little bit fiddly. That's the focusing screen that you can change for something different, with perhaps different lines on it, different kind of focusing aids. You can see on the right here you've got your shutter speed dial, which goes from a 500th of a second, which is usually the fastest you can get with a leaf shutter, all the way down to 8 full seconds. It's plenty for what you'd need for this camera, really. Having a look at this side, down the bottom here you've got a cable release socket, so you can screw your little cable release in there so you don't cause vibration when you're taking a long exposure. This button here releases the film back. We'll come on to the film backs in a minute, but they just clip on. this last button here actually is a battery test. So if I lift up the viewfinder, actually why don't I take it off, it's probably easier to see. If you press that battery test button, you get a little red light just there which shows that the battery is okay. While we're on the subject of the battery, it's in there, and it takes like a long 6-volt, again I can't remember off the top of my head the name of it, but it's like 4 1.5 volt cells stacked together, but I'll give you the reference on the screen for what that is. So that's the that side of the camera. Having a look at the other side, you've obviously got your winding crank, which is for winding on the film. You've also got your shutter release here. This is a multiple exposure lever, which if you push it forward like that, it will wind the shutter but will not advance the film. So be careful if you're wanting to take just normal photos that is in the normal position up like that. So let's take a look at the film back itself. So it has a dark slide, obviously, so that when you're carrying them normally you don't expose the film. This control is for when you're loading the film at the start. You've got an exposure counter just in here. To open the film back and actually get the film in, it's a kind of complicated process which took me a while to work out, but you have to slide that little bit to the left and then push, and then the back opens out and this whole section lifts out. So this is your film carrier, and I'll just demonstrate loading a film so that you can see how it works. So once you've got your film out of the plastic, you need to take off the paper around the outside and discard of that. Then these little things pop out here. I should say that when you take the last film out, the empty spool is on that side. So the first thing you do is actually take the empty spool out of that side and put it into this side, which is the take-up spool. And these little spindles here flick in to actually just trap that spool in place. Then the next thing you do is you obviously put this into this side and shut that. Then you pull the film back across the film plane there and insert it into the slot in the spindle, which is just there. Once it's in, you use this to wind the film on until the arrow appears. It says start, and you'll see there's a little orange arrow just there, which you line that up with like that. Then you put the film carrier back into the back, close the back, and then you can either wind on from here to get it to the start position, or the alternative is that you can just clip the back to the camera and wind on with the normal crank, and you'll see that it winds on. You'll see the arrows moving until it hits number 1, and then you're ready. The shutter is cocked, the film is ready, and you're good to go. So actually quite a simple film loading operation, and the great thing is, of course, you can still take the film back off even though you've got film in it, and swap it for something else if you're doing some black and white or whatever. So obviously you need to, before you can shoot, you need to take the dark slide out, With these dark slides, you have to make sure that that little dot there matches up with that little dot there, because there's a little tab at the bottom which has to go into that little slot there. That's one of the interlocks that make sure you can't fire the shutter with the dark slide in place. It's got a lot of these kind of interlocks so that you can't do anything stupid. I'm sure you could still do stupid things if you tried hard enough, but it tries to ensure that you don't do anything stupid like exposing a blank frame of film. So once your film is loaded, the shooting process is actually remarkably simple. You've got a viewfinder which gives you a downwards view which is reversed from left to right. So it takes a bit of getting used to feel what it actually align a photo. This little lever here flips up a magnifying screen that you can get close detail for focusing on the screen. You just push that down to see the whole screen. You take your light meter reading with an external light meter, set your aperture and your shutter, and remove the dark slide, and then you can take your picture. So that's just a brief introduction to the Bronica ETRS. So when I bought this, you'll see on here I've got a 40mm wide angle lens. I kind of like the wide view, like landscapes and things like that. I like the wide view, but I did also get a standard lens with the camera, which is a 75mm lens, is the equivalent of a 50mm lens on 35mm. Again, looks remarkably clean, really, in really decent condition. This one came with a skylight filter already added on. This is a f2.8. This 40mm is an f4. This was in absolutely mint condition. It came with a box and everything, that lens. So yeah, haven't investigated any other accessories yet. The one that might be worth getting, there are a couple actually that might be worth getting, is the prism finder, which allows you to use the camera at eye level, and with that you can get a trigger grip here with a shutter release on the top there, and also a winder that goes that way, so you kind of hold it more like a 35mm camera. The advantage of that is that because this is 645 and it's not a square format, it's quite hard to take pictures in the vertical format without having a prism viewfinder. Obviously this is a problem you don't get with the Hasselblad, which is 6x6, because it's a square format. You just crop it to whatever frame size you like. But with this one, might be worth getting a prism. And the other advantage of the prism is that it has a built-in meter, so you can actually do some automatic exposure. You can set your aperture here and it will automatically set the shutter speed. So might be something that's worth getting at some point in the future. But at the moment, I quite like the manual nature of this. This is my light meter, which is as you can see, it's a Gossen Vario 6F. It's got two modes of operation. Obviously, it's an incident light meter, which allows you to just measure the light falling on a subject. So that's a 1/8 of a second at f/5.6 in ISO 100 speed. So, or you can take this little dome off here, and it will act as a reflected light meter. So you can take the reading off the thing that's being illuminated. Sometimes comes up with a similar figure, but sometimes it's different. It depends the reflectivity of that's a whole other video. I'm not going to go into that right now, but I tend to use it generally in incident light mode, because that's generally more accurate because it doesn't necessarily depend on the reflective nature of the subject. Anyway, so armed with this and that, let's go and take some pictures. I thought it'd be interesting just to show you what this film looks like on a light box. As you can see, it's, apologies for the flickery, horrible old light box. This came from the UK about 20 years ago. I really must buy another one. In fact, that's backwards, so let's put it the right way around. So you can see how huge these transparencies are compared to 35mm, which is about that big, almost probably double the size of a 35mm transparency. So yeah, you can see that it takes like 15 frames of 6x4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and those I didn't take the last three, but yeah, it's about 15 frames, 16 maybe. So these are just some pictures that I took recently at a car show. You can see so much, you get so much detail in these transparencies. It's just the amount of sharpness and detail you can get out of these bigger negatives and transparencies is just absolutely fantastic. You can see immediately that I've had some exposure problems here. As I say, I was using my iPhone to do the light metering with an app, and it didn't really do the job particularly well, so I'll be taking my proper light meter out next time. But I'll show some of the larger versions of these images on the screen in a minute, and you can see just how fantastic these large transparencies turn out when you scan them. So I hope you've enjoyed this little video on the Bronica ETRS. I have to say I'm really enjoying using it. It's quite a lot smaller than the Hasselblad. A little bit lighter as well, although still quite solid. It's, you know, metal construction everywhere, but just great to get back to basic photography. No automation, no cheats. It's just, you've got to measure, get the light right, and you've got to set it right, and you've got to, it's all down to you. So yeah, fantastic. And as you saw from some of those photos, I was using my iPhone for a light meter. It wasn't as great as having the Gaussian meter. So yeah, hopefully in my next role I will be able to get some better exposure, and I do absolutely love seeing the huge transparencies on a light box. It is really fantastic, and that's one of the great pleasures of having medium format film photography, because they really do look stunning. Anyway, that's just about it for this video. Really hope you've enjoyed it. If you like this kind of content, please smash that like. It'd be great to have you as a subscriber, and yeah, thanks very much for watching. See you in the next one.